going. Yeah, so I'm just doing a quick test of some loudness stuff. So I've been learning a lot about loudness and mastering lately. And I was just kind of going through and comparing a few songs to see their relative loudnesses. And it's been pretty interesting. The tools I've been using are the Ulean loudness meter, which has the LUFS metric of measuring loudness, which is different than like decibels, something more related to actual human perception of hearing. So this is kind of the industry standard, I guess, way to measure loudness. And then Dead Crow was also recommending this plugin, or using this plugin Span, which is kind of analyzer. So let me just play a few things. So here's some of my songs. All right, so real quick, what we just saw there is some my two songs, and they were around -8 LUFS. Here's Breathwork. That section got even louder at -6 somehow. Here is Uppers and Downers by Sudire, which, I don't know, is super clean. Like, it's a super clean track. Runaway by Astral, super loud. What's also interesting is that it's very heavy, and there's not a lot of space in the music. Like every instrument in the track kind of like goes on for a long time. Not a lot of short elements. So that's in my folder of reference tracks for just like loud tracks. Here's this Just Connor track that I like a lot. That's also pretty. Also very loud and clear. Apparently somehow similar volume to this Breathwork part. Apparently my track was even a little bit louder, which is weird to me because I've always had issues getting my stuff pretty loud, and I've never really known how to do it. Violet. So Iochi always has really loud tracks. Sorry if that was very loud, but that's like -5, one of the loudest ones we've seen so far today. So yeah, just exploring this. My stuff is not that loud. Seems to be consistently around -7, 8 is around how loud I can get it. So that's one tool to look at. The other one that's pretty interesting is this kind of spectrum analyzer. So it's showing an overlay of the frequencies like you might see on an EQ or something like that. And you can see the kind of relative bass and treble volumes. So one thing I learned from Dead Crow in his Patreon is that treble is really important for perceived loudness. loud, basically loud songs have a lot of treble. And he was showing some like crazy dubstep songs that are super loud. And the funny, interesting thing is, even though they're dubstep, which is supposed to be like a bass music, they're super loud because they have a lot of treble frequency content in the basses, and actually the sub is sitting relatively low compared to the treble, and that's how they can get them really like both like technically loud on a dB level and also perceived loud on a LUFS level with all the treble frequencies. That was pretty interesting to me. I didn't know this before. And I think a lot of my stuff is kind of bass heavy actually, because I just assumed that you need loud bass for this kind of music. But in retrospect, that was actually probably why I was having so much trouble getting my tracks to be as loud as everyone else's. Even though it kind of seems like actually things are kind of comparable around 7. And it took me a long time to even get there. A lot of my older songs are not even around there, and I try to get them loud, and they're all distorting and stuff because I was pushing them into like limiters and whatever. So anyway, yeah, span is a cool tool. Let's look at Zodira. Yeah, so clearly this is a pretty bass heavy track, and you can see that here. Like the bass comes through very clean. What's interesting about breathwork is that it actually has a lot of mids. Like it has some of those hi-hats and whatever, but those are not quite as prominent. And it also has a lot of bass. One thing that's a mystery to me is the difference between the span plugin and the built-in Ableton Spectrum tool. You would think they do similar things and would show the same thing, but they show different things, like for breath. So different things, like the bass peaks way lower here than it does here for some reason. And then in general, the highs don't seem quite as high. Let's go to this one. So this track is really cool. It's also really crystal clear and decently loud feeling. Actually, the LUFS is not that high. The LUFS is not that high. It's like -10, which is technically quieter than like everything we've listened to so far. Yet there's so much clarity and like kind of perceived loudness also in that, and a lot of it is coming from the percussion is really crisp and loud here, which you can see here. There's relatively high amounts of treble content versus the bass, which gives it a lot of clarity and perceived loudness, even though for somehow it's kind of like a quiet song technically from the LUFS. It gains a lot of loudness somehow from the treble. So I brought in just also this song by Tinashe, which is like a mainstream rap song. And what's interesting about it is that it's super quiet compared to everything else. You can literally just even see this in the waveform. It is like way not as smashed as like every other track here. I don't know if that's just because I ripped it from YouTube or whatever, but like the song is quote unquote quiet. I be on the block with shorty, going extra hard, yeah, we just might order. Need to re-up, we connect with a homie. Every time I call it, pull up on me. And I whip the whip till it's blue black. And everybody asking where the roof at. They wanna know how I do that. Oh, should drop the top, hot box supply, go out of time, you lie. Just ride with me, we gon' hit this. So it's -10. Let me just get this one. And what's interesting is that there's also a lot of bass here, but it's still quite clear. But it's just interesting to see that really mainstream like rap songs are also like, they don't have to be that loud also. So you don't need to actually care too much necessarily about having like a crazy loud song. Yeah, so that's what I know about loudness.